You know what frustrates me? It's actually not the communists. You know that? Or when I take the thing out of my ear and I go home at night, I talk to my wife and kids or friends, whenever I think about politics, have a moment alone, think about politics or talk about politics with people, it's actually not Democrats. It's not the communists who I complain most about, who frustrate me the most. And I should explain why. Let's start there. I know what they are. I know what the communist is. I know he's an anti-human. I know he wants to burn down America. I know he lies every time he opens his mouth. I know. I get it. I'm not angry with the lion for hunting down deer on the prairie. Why? It's his nature. That's what he does. I understand why the communist does what he does. So I don't complain about them. I've accepted what they are. He's my enemy. I must defeat him. I'm complaining about our people the most. They're what frustrate me the most. Top to bottom, we don't have an opposition party. We really, truly do not. When you think about the course of your life, no matter how old you are, 5, 55, 85, 95, where are the GOP wins? Where are those at? Where are the big wins for the right wing? Have there been any? Let me spoil it for you. There haven't been. On a macro level, this entire society, culturally, financially, every possible way has shifted left, and only left for my 42 years on this planet. Yeah, you'll get a Republican elected president now and then, but even when that happens, there are little improvements on the margins here and there, maybe a little tax cut, some fewer regulations, better border policy, but in the end, society's still going left. Why? Well, first, understand that the system itself, our institutions in this country, they are left. And that is actually one of the main reasons the country's only gone left. Because what happens is we don't send Republicans to Washington, D.C. who want to attack the system. And that's what we need. We need someone to attack the system so it's no longer left wing. We send them to D.C. and instead they get immediately co-opted by the system and they represent the system instead of you. I'm going to tell you something. And people think I'm lying when I say this, but I'm telling you, this is not something I think. I know this because I know people in the House and the Senate, a lot of them, and I've known them for a few years now. Republican leadership, they hate you, and they hate you way more than Democrat leadership does. If you ask the normal Republican, the normal person on the right out there, who hates them more, Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell? 100 out of 100 of them would say, well, Nancy Pelosi, that witch. Even if they don't like McConnell, they would think it's Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi never thinks about you. She doesn't need your votes. She's busy whipping Democrat votes. She doesn't need your votes in her city. Someone like Chuck Schumer doesn't need your votes in New York State. They don't stress about you, the GOP base, the average right-winger. So you're not a concern, really, for them. They know you're there, and they don't like you, but you never occupy a second of their mind. Mitch McConnell despises you. And I'm using him as a placeholder, but this is all GOP leadership. They despise you because they have to pretend to care about you. And you see this, Mitch McConnell is a great example, because you see this at the end of their career. Mitch McConnell's finished. He's going to get kicked out of leadership. He's probably not going to run again. If he does, I mean, we've all seen his physical state. He doesn't have 20 years left, right? Mitch McConnell's not around much longer, so he's got that light at the end of the tunnel. So what happens is Mitch McConnell, he doesn't have to lie anymore. He doesn't have to go on television and pretend to give a crap about your grocery prices or your Second Amendment rights. They get real honest in their later years.
Providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians, that's the number one priority for the United States right now. According to most Republicans, that's sort of how we see the challenges confronting the country at the moment.
I want you to think about that. Just marinate on that for a moment. No matter how you feel about Russia, Ukraine, or whatever foreign aid, none of that stuff actually matters. Set all that stuff aside for the moment. That's the most important thing for Republicans right now. What a statement that is. I know you You know that's obviously false. Anyone who has friends, anyone who's bought groceries, anything, the cost of everything, your power bill. No one even talks about our power bill. Interest rates going up. You're being smashed everywhere you turn. Job market's garbage, dollars garbage, prices high on everything. And the most powerful Republican in Washington, D.C. feels completely comfortable getting up and saying the most important thing right now is Ukraine. There's not a single woman crying in the grocery store because she can't afford the groceries that week who thinks the most important thing in the world is Ukraine right now. But GOP leadership does. This is the source of my frustration, the GOP. We want them to fight back, and they won't. We've hired them to fight back. We've specially selected them. That's why we elected them. You, go, fight for me. That's what it means to live in a representative republic. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a representative republic. But our representatives, our fighters that we hire, they go to D.C. and they lay down every single time. Drives me insane. Let's talk to Mike about it. Joining me now, my friend Mike Cernovich. He and I have some great conversations about these useless Republicans from time to time. Figure we might as well do it on camera. He is the creator of Hoaxed. By the way, that Hoaxed you made years ago, Cerno, that thing has held up so incredibly well. If you want to understand how the media creates stories, like the model you laid out, they use it all the time. It's amazing how consistent they are.
Yeah, conceptually, not much has really changed. The tactics are the same. The strategy's the same. Even if the stories are different, it's all the same.
Republicans, they frustrate me actually more than the dirty commies do, Mike, because I want an opposing party, right? I want somebody who represents me and represents my values and fights for those things like they tell me they're going to, and they don't. I hire a fighter and he goes out there and lays down every fight. Who are the worst of them? Is it McConnell? Is he the worst?
Yeah, I understand your sentiment because I share it too, because I live in California and I hear all the time, oh, commie foreigner this, commie foreigner that. Okay, bro, who'd you send in Oklahoma? Oh, Langford? Who's going to do an amnesty deal and rolls over Chuck Schumer. Great job, guys. So at least I know that I'm occupied and I'm not in any kind of delusion. Whereas people who, Cornyn, probably going to be the next majority leader. If the Republicans take the House, we'll have Texas, right? That's probably who it's going to be. So people have the nerve to go on and on about California when they live in a red state, and that's the kind of people they're sending. Oh, Mitt Romney, great, congratulations, right? So that would be my challenge to them, and your challenge to your audience too, because hey, in California, we still elect Republicans. People don't even understand state politics in California, so I'm not going to go into all that. But we're doing the best we can. Right. We're doing the best we can. Devin Nunes was sent from California. Devin Nunes is the one who uncovered the plot against the president and unraveled a lot of the hoaxes created by the Democrats. Why wasn't that a deep red state Congress member or deep red state senator? That would be the question that I have for people who want to worry so much about California.
Well, it is the question, Mike. In fact, it's kind of the theme of the special I'm doing right now. Why is it? Look, I'm in Texas. You brought him up. You know I hate him anyway. Everyone knows I hate him. He definitely knows I hate him. John Cornyn. This is Texas. God, guns, and America. This is Texas. And one of our two senators is the most milquetoast, pathetic loser. You would think he'd be a Republican representative. One of these guys who ran the inside straight in Massachusetts and managed to squeeze in there. We are in Texas. We could get somebody to the right of me, but it's not unique to Texas, the Dakotas, Oklahoma, the southern states, South Carolina. Why is it like this? What's wrong with the GOP voters in these states?
Well, Trump, he'll endorse all of these people, obviously. So there's a problem with the Trump endorsement. The biggest problem I have, and I post this on X, maybe ineloquently, is Christians are too worried about someone Christian, right? Oh, this is a man of God. Oh, he goes to, Lindsey Graham goes to prayer breakfast, bro. If you think Lindsey Graham is somebody who has deeply held religious beliefs, get real, right? So the problem with the Republican voter base is that there's a naivety that flows through Christianity to where they think, oh, this is Speaker Johnson's an evangelical. He's a man of God, right? And what I've said is, let's just be real. The person who gave the most to the pro-life movement and the Christian conservative movement was Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was not living this Pharisee life of, oh, I'm at prayer breakfast, let's have a bagel together and in Jesus' name and everything, not to mock the Lord, but to mock the people who, the Pharisees who perform like that publicly. That's the biggest problem. So be Christian. Christian's great. But somebody telling you, oh, I'm a Christian, you need to vote for me, I'm going to bring back God and everything. I don't know how many more times you got to fall for that kind of stuff, man. Vote for the person who's going in there for outcomes. The person's religious views are completely irrelevant. Not even because not from a separation of church and state thing, but from a take it off the table, right? Because what I've learned growing up in church is everybody who learns this in church, if you spend enough time, the people who tell you their religious views all the time are the ones that have to tell you because it otherwise wouldn't be obvious. Oh, I didn't know that you're religious because you're a scumbag, you know? So of course they're going to try to front load and showcase those supposed beliefs. So we need people to become much less focused on whether somebody's a quote unquote man of God and more, what are you going to do? You got a job to do, right? Like if I hire somebody to fix my computer, it'd be nice if he's a religious person. It'd be nice if he has a family. It'd be nice if the money was staying within a pro-family community, but the job has to be done. And that's what voters need to be taking accountability for and asking themselves, right? Is this guy going to get the job done?
Mike, why aren't the Christians in office? Why aren't they harder, tougher men? Look, we can make it about Mike Johnson since you brought him up, but he's just the latest example. You know, we elect this guy by every account, and I know many people in Congress, as I know you do. Personally, this is supposed to be a really wonderful man, a really genuine human being, and, you know, devout Christian man, which I personally love. I prefer that, but just gets there and can't grab his ankles fast enough. Why? I don't understand the connection. Why?
Well, within especially Western Christianity, American Christianity, evangelical Christianity, there's been a invade the world, invite the world kind of paradox of it's very weird to think about, but the people who are most pro the Iraq war were evangelicals. And then the people who are for open borders, although it's become a left-wing thing now, we got to invite the world, welcome the stranger. There's that welcome that stranger line of thought within evangelicalism that can be hijacked, which is why, again, I don't want people who center their religion anywhere near political office. I want them to have religion. I want them to view themselves as being accountable to God, because when you view yourself as being accountable to the laws of the universe and laws of God, you're going to behave a little bit differently. But I don't want anybody who leads with that. I want somebody like Donald Trump who says, here's what I'm going to do. Now, you and we go back and forth on X all the time about how Trump has failed in so many of those promises. So obviously there's a sliding scale here. But if we had to compare Donald Trump to Speaker Johnson, surpassed him. There's no question Trump surpassed him. Trump, the secularist, who sort of had to, he allowed in the religious aspect. But I don't think anybody believes that Trump necessarily has the religious views that somebody like Speaker Johnson would have. What's the outcome? So the way we have to look at it, and the way I've looked at it for a while, is I don't want to hear your religion, man. I want you to, in terms of your job, right? I don't want to hear it. I want to look at you and what did you do? But Johnson got rolled over. So I don't care if he prays. I don't care. I care that he lied. I cared that he's a liar, right? If we want to, because I don't want to call people, this guy's fake religion, this guy's faking whatever. I care that people don't have integrity, that people don't have a backbone, that people are betraying voters, that Speaker Johnson has acted as Chuck Schumer's bagman, right? As his butt boy. If we're being completely honest here, nothing on the border, because I look at objective reality, nothing on the border. Ukraine money laundering bonanza keeps going. Hakeem Jeffries is going to protect him, obviously. So there's no point in even Marjorie Taylor Greene, and there's no point in even doing anything like that right now. So then the question would be, what's your faith getting you, right? There's that line in No Country for Old Men, which is, if your rules about the world or beliefs about the world have led you to this moment, then what does that say about your rules, about your beliefs, about how you perceive the world? And that's what I'm trying to say, even though sometimes I come off as anti-Christian when I'm super pro-Christian, because a lot of people aren't smart enough to understand the what people have to look at is, okay, you're voting for these so-called Christian men, and what are you getting? And then what'd you get from Donald Trump, who, if we're being honest, is a secularist? Let's just be honest. I know that he has the prayers and stuff too, because you have to do that politically. But I don't have to play these little games where I'm like, oh yeah, Donald Trump, obviously, obviously, I don't have to play these games, right? So the reality is, who are you getting the most results from? And you're not getting results from people like Speaker Johnson, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and all these other people quoting Bible verses.
Well, that's a fact. Mike, my brother, I appreciate you as I always do. Thank you so much. All right. He's not wrong. He's not wrong. We have Jeremy Carl. We'll talk a little bit about these Senate Republicans next.
Is $60 billion enough money for Ukraine to push back Russia decisively?
Well, we hope so. It's actually only 0.2% of our gross domestic product. So put in that context, it's not a whole lot of money for us.
Yeah, it's not a whole lot of money. It's not even a whole lot of money for us. Why are you worried about it? Do you have a side hustle now? Second job, delivering food for Uber on the weekends, trying to pay your phone bill? $60 billion isn't a lot of money. Why are you worried about it? And will it work? I don't know. We hope so. Joining me now, Jeremy Carl, author of the new book, The Unprotected Class. Jeremy, it blows me away that in a supposed representative republic, nobody, Democrat, Republican, nobody in leadership has any care in the world about what normal people are going through. It just never crosses their mind.
Yeah, absolutely, Jesse. But I don't know. I mean, does it really blow you away? I see you on X all the time, and you're correct. I mean, you're totally right to be that angry, but it's like, the 50th time that Charlie Brown has the football pulled away from him, you sort of are like, yeah, maybe we can't trust Lucy here. And Mitch McConnell's the ultimate Lucy. I mean, he's always, from the moment he said Ukraine aid should be the first priority. I mean, he calls himself a Reagan Republican, but he really, he was elected first in the Ford era, and he's really just kind of a dinosaur. But unfortunately, that dinosaur has really been leading the party, and he's got, unfortunately, as we know from the secret ballot Senate reelection that he still has most of the caucus behind him. Although I think finally this immigration bill, where he absolutely sandbagged every single one of our Senate candidates, and President Trump's reelection kind of campaign, was finally maybe the straw that broke the camel's back there.
Can you explain why, for people who don't understand how leadership works, how could somebody who routinely torpedoes Republican priorities constantly get the backing of the majority of Republicans in the Senate? It doesn't make sense, Jeremy.
Well, Jesse, it only doesn't make sense if you think that the Republicans in the Senate as a whole have any interest in the voters' priorities. And if you think if they do, then it would be very mysterious. But if you think they're just out to mostly kind of enrich themselves or kind of play the DC game, then it makes total sense. And I want to back off in saying that we do have a number of good Republican senators, and we had about 10 to 12 senators who voted against McConnell in his last reelect. And I think there are probably a few others who didn't, who still would kind of, maybe they didn't love Rick Scott, the alternative, but they still thought that there were better people than Mitch McConnell. So it's not that we don't have anybody, but the whole game is rigged. You look at Mitch McConnell, one of the worst things he's done as leader over many, many years is that he's controlled our reelect process. So he's controlling what type of senators even get nominated for our party. And he makes sure that there are those who are going to toe the establishment line and not cause trouble for him.
Mitch McConnell's about to leave, and what I'm about to say, I find it so physically painful. John Cornyn is probably going to be the one who replaces him. This would be John Cornyn, this John Cornyn.
Hi, I'm Texas Senator John Cornyn. The last year has proven quite a challenge as we've navigated the impact of COVID-19. But with safe and effective vaccines finally being administered, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Getting vaccinated is the fastest way that life can return to normal.
Jeremy, you say that it's rigged, but here I sit in Texas, in this state that everyone loves to tell us is very red, and it is red. Obviously, it goes red every election. And yet our worst senators are from states like Texas, both Dakotas, Louisiana, South Carolina, Wyoming suck, Utah, what are you doing? You say it's rigged, but the GOP primary voter is given choices, and I checked last time John Cornyn was up for re-election, 76% of the primary vote. Jeremy, I think we have a voter problem.
Well, we do, Jesse, and you've said this yourself, and I admire you for your boldness on Twitter and not letting our own voters and even the folks who are following your account, of whom there are many, escape accountability. It's all fine and well to complain about the McConnells and the Cornyns, and they're absolutely awful, but we are reelecting these folks. I mean, I think the mitigating factor, of course, is that a challenger to those guys needs money, et cetera, et cetera. They need access to elite networks. It's very hard to get that when the whole might of the GOP apparatus is against you. But at the end of the day, that's not a sufficient excuse. We need to be paying attention. And in some states where we are paying attention, we do have better results. And in fact, sort of Mike Lee was elected over the incumbent Senator Bennett, who had been horrible through Utah's kind of unique process. And I now think that we are going to replace Romney, absolutely, probably the worst GOP senator out there. I don't even know we can call him GOP, quite honestly. Hopefully with Trent Staggs. And he was a guy who I'd supported very early, but had no money, but had a lot of key grassroots guys behind him. And then Trump swept in right before the convention and endorsed him, and he won that convention endorsement. And I'm hopeful and optimistic now that he can be the nominee, but we sort of need better processes. We need better primary voters to be paying attention. Guys like Cornyn, who've done gun grabbing, who are fighting with the Texas Attorney General, who is actually a conservative hero. It's mind-boggling, and I'm just hopeful. That we are going to have a better selection than either Cornyn or Thune, who is almost as bad as Cornyn for the next cycle. I think it's really, really important that President Trump, especially if he is in office, really weighs in and puts his thumb on the scales in that race to get somebody who he could actually work with on voter priorities.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually brought up Thune, because I didn't just want to focus on the useless human barnacle that is John Cornyn. John Thune, if it's not Cornyn, it's going to be Thune, leading the United States Senate. A senator, when asked to defend your right to own an AR-15, the best argument he could come up with was that some people in his state use them for prairie dogs. We seriously can't get anyone who can speak about freedom elected into leadership. Is the game that rigged that's how it works, Jeremy?
Well, I'm afraid it often is. And as you point out, South Dakota is one of the most conservative states. It's one of the most conservative voting areas. I think sometimes people look at folks like Thune or Romney, and they kind of look like they're the casting call GOP senators, the square jaw, and they kind of, slightly rugged handsomeness, like they sort of say, oh, that's what a kind of masculine, tough GOP senator should look like, who's standing for America first. And meanwhile, these guys are just selling America down the river left and right. Cornyn has, Flake, there's another disaster of one. Thankfully, we got rid of him. But Thune has been an absolute kind of a disaster as a senator. He has been Mitch McConnell's kind of right hand for a lot of the worst things that he's done. He has been he's tried to undermine Trump on many occasions. He was kind of very waffling on the impeachment issue, and it's just incredibly frustrating that we are kind of fooled by these appearances and continue to kind of put forward these guys who are really just not following what we want them to do at all.
No, it is for sure. Jeremy, thank you, my brother. I appreciate it. All right. Steve Deace is going to join us next. So we have some governors, another senator. We're not done yet. Hang on.
Hey, Senator, why is it important for you to be out here today?
We need a voice against racism. We need many voices against racism and against brutality. We need to stand up and say that Black Lives Matter.
I'm just so embarrassed. I mean, I'm sitting here, all I can do is all I can think about is that man was the Republican nominee for president, and I voted for him. Look, I did. I voted for him. Joining me now, Steve will yell at me, I'm sure. My friend Steve Deace hosted the amazing Steve Deace show on The Blaze. Steve, every time, all I can do is put my head down whenever I see him talk. I not only voted for him, I was working in politics at the time. I was down at Romney events at the convention down in Tampa. Dude, I'm so ashamed.
At least you admit it. We all have things we are ashamed of. I have mine. He's not one of them. I could very well be one of the major reasons Mitt Romney was never president of the United States. I'm certainly why he didn't win an Iowa caucus the 2 times that he tried. And I'm very proud of that. I wish I could tell you that what's become of him since he became a senator is a surprise, but it's not. He's actually been very honest. I mean, this is what he ran on going back to his first race in 1994 when he was running to the left of Ted Kennedy in the Contract with America year. He's the father of gay marriage. He gave Barack Obama his worst idea before he had it with Romneycare. He was doing taxpayer-funded abortions before we ever had Obamacare do it. So, I mean, we got to remember that people's records, there's this really wise man who once said, by their fruit you will know them. It's not what people say, it's what they do that matters. And his record has been pretty consistent all the way through. There was just a brief period of time that he needed to lie to people like you. And his advisor at the time, Eric Fenstrom, compared the primary to an Etch-a-Sketch, if you remember, and you just shake it up when it's over, and then you go back to being the person you really want to be. And luckily, there are more and more people on the right waking up saying, I'm tired of being lied to. Let's just hope it's not too few and too late.
Steve, okay, so setting my presidential vote aside, I promise I wasn't a Romney staffer at the time. What grades on me is the Romney-Utah thing. Romney, Massachusetts, at least you can excuse away, a fairly blue state. Utah's a red place, Steve. I love Utah. I spent a lot of time there. Very red. Why is Senator Mitt Romney from Utah? Why is Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa? Why is she a senator from Iowa? Iowa is meat and potatoes, Midwest. It's that area where I grew up. It's not Joni Ernst, and yet there she sits, carpet bombing the Constitution every single day from the red state of Iowa. Why?
I've known Joni Ernst for many years. When she was she originally ran for Senate in that race. And her candidacy was so bad, the Republican establishment tried to convince her to drop out and run for Congress instead. Marco Rubio's people constructed one galvanizing commercial for her, the Squeal commercial that went viral. It was an internet ad. She didn't even have money to put it on TV back when internet ads were a gimmick, not what they are now, and ended up getting on The Tonight Show and everything else, and that won her the nomination. When she ran in that race, she was a strong advocate of life at conception or personhood. And then after she had won the nomination, we have this event in Iowa every summer called the Leadership Summit. And it's the event that Tucker Carlson helmed last summer with the presidential candidates. And she came over to my table, and I was doing a life at conception pledge. And even though she supported life of conception as a state senator. She'd already done it. She already voted for my life of conception bill. She refused to sign my pledge on the grounds that it would kill her in the Senate election. In other words, somehow the Democrats would not previously look up that she had voted for it as a state senator and only were looking at whether she signed the Steve Deace pledge. You know, kind of like if, hypothetically speaking, we had a Republican presidential candidate who overturned Roe v. Wade, the shibboleth of the damned, and smashed it right in their face, and then thought that he'd be able to backtrack on the abortion issue after doing something like that, and the Democrats would let him get away with it. Just hypothetically speaking, of course.
Yes, purely hypothetically. Okay, well, how does she get elected in Iowa, Steve? Iowa could elect you. Iowa's right. Iowa's red, real red. How does she make it through a primary every time? That's really what we're talking about tonight. And we've got our own senator here, Cornyn. I tell the same thing.
Yep.
How does it happen every single time?
You were lucky if we give 25% turnout in a GOP primary. We had 14% turnout. Pardon me, 14% turnout in the Iowa caucuses back in January. 14. People just don't show up. They don't take part in the process. The only people that do show up are largely retirees who, when they're not dumping their nickel, their kids' inheritance in the nickel slots at the local casino, come home and just watch Fox News and Newsmax all day and get the Team GOP establishment talking points and go vote for Lindsey Graham and go vote for Joni Ernst and go vote for Mitt Romney and all of these alleged red states. You know, that's really what it is. I mean, the people are the problem. And, you know, in a early iteration of my career, I was a contributor at MSNBC as a token conservative. Jesse, I did about 50, at least around 50 appearances on that network over the course of 3 years. And we debated every conceivable issue you could imagine. Never once did I do a segment on any show where they were like, well, we got to make sure to nominate the more electable Democrat, the one the polls tell us can win. It's Louisiana. We can't, we got to make sure we nominate a pro-life Democrat. No, they just nominated Mary Landrieu and made her vote like Dianne Feinstein. They have a real movement. They have a real party. They have real principles, real agreement. On the right, we're not united really on any governing vision at all. We're united in a common disdain for the Marxist left. And so that's why they tend to be, well, they used to be a good opposition party. They're not even that anymore under Speaker Johnson. But they used to be great at saying no. But they've always been bad at what to do instead because you can't herd the cats. There's too many people that are Randian libertarians, Rand Paul libertarians, Christian conservatives, right-wing Nietzsche's. I mean, the coalition is unsustainable. It's a tent without stakes the center can't hold.
One thing to wrap this up that really, really grates on me about primary voters or lack thereof is how they didn't abuse their GOP governors for the COVID lockdowns. KIV comes to mind. Here she was.
We're getting a slight increase in the number of doses that we'll be getting to the state.
Sorry, that was immature. That was KIV, but I could have done Mike DeWine. I could have done all of them. GOP states, red states, Steve, were treated like North Korea because of a bad chest cold. And after that, GOP voters lined up in droves to reelect every single one of these guys. In fact, to my knowledge, the only lockdown politician in the United States of America who lost his position was Donald Trump. Am I wrong about that?
Right. Yeah. No, you're not wrong about that. In fact, the 2022 midterms, Jesse, may have permanently broken me, or at least until something is proven otherwise. I mean, that shouldn't have just been a red wave. That should have been a red wedding. That should have been 1994 and 2014 combined. All of the negative energy. The polling for Democrats was every bit as bad as it is for them right now. And there was no Trump on the ballot, so our suburban, soft-headed Karen neighbors can no longer say, look at the mean tweets. All right, so it was just issues, straight up and down, a straight up and down vote, referendum. Do you like the direction of the country? Instead, we had one of the most incumbent positive midterm elections in modern American political history. Not a single meaningful incumbent lost, not a single lockdown incumbent lost absolutely anywhere. And at that point, I mean, I don't know what to do. When the people won't even do the easy thing anymore and just vote bad guys out, and when they don't have to ask what the governing vision is, when they won't even do a 1994 anymore, they won't even do a Tea Party midterm election anymore. They just can't even be bothered, and we've seen that continue. Last year, Jesse, in the off-year open elections in 2023, Democrats overperformed the partisan demographics in those off-year contested elections by an average of 9 points. They destroyed the Republican Party everywhere in off-year elections. And we've just seen that go into this year with turnout down in a lot of these primaries, turnout down in the Iowa caucuses. It really does seem that, a lot of our people, frankly, have just kind of rolled over and given up.
Dang. Man, I hope you're wrong, but it sure does friggin' seem that way. Steve, thank you so much, my brother. As always, I appreciate you. You're the best. All right. We're not done. Hang on.
Bob Good endorsed my opponent, a known neo-Nazi. These people used to walk around with white hoods at night. Now they're walking around with white hoods in the daytime.
A known neo-Nazi. That's Republican Tony Gonzalez, who I freaking despise in Texas. And joining me now is the man I've talked about on my radio show. You want to change the country? It's not in November. It's during the primary where you change the country. Brandon Herrera, he's running against him. We need him to win. Brandon, for some reason, these DC types, Republican or Democrat, they all use the same language. You're always a Nazi, white supremacist, all this stuff. There's something about that city, man, that just ruins you.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. It's really interesting, though, that my opponent and opponents like mine all across the country, just the uniparty types, seem to have a lot of friends in liberal media that they can turn to all the time, and friends that they can regurgitate leftist talking points to. It's very odd. It's a very odd phenomenon.
You know what else is odd? You are known as the AK guy, and I just need you to explain to me, why would someone prefer an AK over an AR? What's wrong with you?
There's a lot of history behind the AK platform. I kind of dig it. I like that we're rebuilding guns off of surplus parts kits that were made in East Germany or Romania, used in the Balkan Wars, got cut up in, Czechoslovakia, imported here. I think it's kind of cool. It's got a neat history to it.
I got to be honest, I'm a huge hypocrite. I actually carried one. I picked up off, well, it doesn't matter. I carried one in Baghdad for a little while just because I liked it too. There's something feels raw and manly about it, and I don't know why. And I know it's an inferior weapon, at least I think it is, but I carried it anyway because it's freaking cool. All right, let's go back to your congressional race. Tony Gonzalez seems to take the left side on many, many, many things. How many things have there been? I lost count at this point.
Yeah, he takes the left side on a lot of things. And again, because my history, obviously, with the Second Amendment, the firearms industry, that's what got me paying attention in the very beginning, is that he was voting, my Texas conservative congressman was voting with Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi on a gun control bill. And that really blew my mind. And then the more I paid attention to the rest of his votes, for vaccine tracking databases, against the family, for taxpayer-funded abortion, and his fights against real Republicans like Chip Roy on the border, despite being the border czar, as he calls himself. It really was mind-blowing.
No, it is mind-blowing. And I want to remind everyone that Republicans, there aren't many of them who are welcome on this show, but all the ones who are pretty much have backed Brandon Herrera, the Bob Goods, the Chip Roys of the world. That tells you all you need to know. But speaking of who's backing whom, I thought it was interesting that Mike Johnson went out to fundraise for Tony Gonzalez. What say you?
I think it's a really bad sign when future former Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has to go out and fundraise in a primary against an entrenched, well-funded, or for an entrenched, well-funded Republican incumbent. That's just not a good sign that you're doing well, and that means that he's got access to the same polls that I do, and he knows that he's in trouble because the people of Texas are finally waking up to the fact that their congressman's been voting against their interests for so long, and they need change. And like you said, Change doesn't come in November. It comes in the primaries.
Tell me about these polls.
So a lot of the polls have us, and I don't want to get to too crazy details, but a lot of people have been doing polling on this race, especially after the CNN debacle with Tony, where he basically declared a civil war against the conservative elements of the Republican Party. And a lot of them have not been coming up with the results that he was hoping. Because, in the primary, he took 45% of the vote. We took 25. And in my mind, I always thought that, hey, that says that 55% of the district voted against the incumbent. A really, really bad place for an incumbent to be. And so a lot of these polls, I think he was expecting to be doing better than he is.
How about that? I like it. All right. Brandon, if people want to support you, where do they go to do that?
Well, if you're in District 23, just remember to show up on May 28th, where we can finish sending the message that we sent on March 5th and get this rhino incumbent out of Congress. Other than that, it's BrandonHerreraforCongress.com. That's the website. And man, just follow along. It's been a pleasure poking the Uniparty directly in the eye, and I'm willing to keep doing it as long as it takes.
Keep poking them, brother. I'm rooting for you. Talk to him. All right. We're not done yet. Hang on. So who's the worst Republican in America? There are so many to choose from. Is it John Cornyn, Mike Johnson, Mitch McConnell? Who might it be? Well, let's do the big reveal here now. The worst Republican in America is the GOP primary voter. The Republican primary voter. It's true. We don't show up. 25% of us even show up to primaries, and the ones who do show up, they're apparently the dumbest ones. The ones who do show up, they show up and they vote for the same losers every single time. You, me, the voter, the GOP primary voter, we have the power to remake the GOP in its entirety in a matter of 4 to 6 years. Could have an entirely new GOP. If we care to get off the couch, turn off the game for an hour, and go vote and get involved in primaries. Until the GOP primary voter changes his ways, we cannot save this country. That's a fact. All right, we'll do it again.